The Lotus Emira, with its mid-engine setup, tackled the infamous Putnam's Leap effortlessly, showcasing its finely tuned suspension. As the car hit the first rise, the rear tires momentarily lost grip, but the impact was smoothly absorbed, and even the second, harder bump failed to unsettle the car. Inside the cabin, the scene remained calm and composed, despite the hard work the springs, dampers, and bump stops were doing to manage the weight of the rear-mounted V6. This serene response on a stretch of road with a wild history underscores the Emira's exceptional chassis tuning. Putnam's Leap dates back to the late 1960s, when Lotus's Hethel factory had just opened. Roger Putnam, then a young sales director at the company, was one of the many employees who drove this shortcut daily. In a show of brand loyalty, Putnam purchased a Lotus Elan, likely aided by a company discount. One morning, while driving at speed, his Elan took off over the first rise, landed poorly, and hit the second bump too fast for its lightweight suspension to manage. The car veered off, rolled through a field, and left Putnam standing dazed next to the wreckage. The story goes that Colin Chapman, Lotus's founder, arrived shortly after in his massive Ford Galaxy, a gift from winning the 1965 Indy 500. "Whose car is that?" Chapman yelled. When Putnam admitted it was his, Chapman, upon realizing the Elan wasn't a company car and that his employee wasn't seriously hurt, drove off, leaving Putnam to recover. The road earned its name that day, and Lotus engineers have since tested their cars on it to ensure they perform better than Putnam's unfortunate Elan. Despite the high demands Putnam's Leap places on a car, the Emira remained unfazed. The Emira uses passive suspension with no high-tech active systems like those found on many modern sports cars. The steering, too, is mechanical, powered by a hydraulic pump rather than the more common electric systems. Lotus's decision to stay analog adds to the driving experience, as the steering feedback is rich and nuanced, giving the driver a real sense of connection to the road. The Emira will launch with two engines. The first, a supercharged 3.5-liter V6 from Toyota, produces 400 horsepower and has been a staple in Lotus cars since the Evora. The Emira's aluminum frame and fiberglass body, a combination Lotus has used since the Elise, keep the car's weight to just 3,150 pounds. Paired with a 6-speed manual gearbox, the V6 propels the Emira to 62 miles per hour in 4.3 seconds and tops out at 180 miles per hour. A 2.0-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder from AMG, producing 360 horsepower and paired with a twin-clutch transmission, will follow soon after. The 4-cylinder is set to replace the V6 eventually, as Europe phases out internal combustion engines. The car I drove was a V6 First Edition with a manual transmission and the firmer sport chassis setup, riding on Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires. These tires are essentially semi-slicks, track-focused but still road-legal. From the moment I left the factory, it was clear the sport setup was on the firm side. While the Emira handled large bumps and uneven surfaces without issue, at lower speeds, the ride felt busy, lacking the refinement that modern active suspensions offer. Yet, this old-school approach to suspension feels like a nod to how sports cars used to be. Tough, direct, and engaging. The Emira's steering also harks back to an earlier era. Unlike modern electric steering systems, which often aim to filter out unnecessary feedback, Lotus embraces it. The Emira's steering rack is slower than most of its competitors, but it's full of feel. You can sense every texture and change in road camber through the steering wheel. The trade-off is occasional kickback on rougher surfaces, but the steering's progressive weight and response make it a joy to use. That said, the Emira's brakes felt a little uncommunicative at gentler speeds, and the gear shift sometimes snagged when shifting quickly, particularly between second and third gears. The V6, while powerful and linear, lacks the character of some of its competitors, and the 750 RPM limit feels a bit restrictive. Despite these minor issues, the Emira delivers impressive performance, matching the Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0 in speed, if not in sound. Where the Emira really shines is in how it blends Lotus's classic driving dynamics with modern comfort and usability. Compared to its predecessors, like the cramped and plasticky Evora, the Emira feels much more refined. The interior is spacious, well-finished, and filled with high-quality materials. The wider doors and narrower sills make getting in and out easier. And while some of the switchgear comes from Volvo, it feels like a vast improvement over the parts bin interiors of earlier Lotus models. However, the Emira's practicality is limited. While there's enough room for tall drivers, the luggage space is minimal. There's no front trunk, and the small rear compartment behind the engine tends to heat up after spirited driving, making it less useful for long trips. The Emira falls short of the Porsche Cayman in terms of storage, but it compensates with its dynamic appeal. In many ways, the Emira feels like a car from a different era. It's the most advanced Lotus to date, but it's also refreshingly simple in a world of increasingly complex sports cars. With a starting price of $93,900, it's far from cheap, but the Emira feels like a fitting tribute to Lotus's legacy, a pure driver's car built for those who still appreciate the thrill of analog motoring.